Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. My name's Dualta and in this podcast series, I will be speaking to investors, advisors, entrepreneurs and recruiters who are based all over the world, and we'll be discussing how to set up, scale and operate a world-class recruitment company. Today's guest is Rob Magee. He's a co-founder at Ingenio Global. They are a specialist in sales recruitment within tech startups. And what makes Rob interesting is that he came to our industry quite late on after being involved in the technology sales arena, scaling companies and doing all of that, and then taking all of those lessons that he learned and trying to tear up the recruitment script. He's learned a lot over the last couple of years. He's brought in some amazing advisors. And in this interview, he'd give me a really honest step-by-step process of what he's learned so far, what he would do differently, what he's up to now, and how they are going to scale this company and become the dominant force in tech sales recruitment in Europe. So really enjoyed speaking to him. And I came away from the interview thinking, wow, I really believe in his vision. And I was really appreciative that he was so honest with all the things that he's learned and maybe some of the things that he would have done better if he could have done it all again from what he knows now. But that's all part of the learning process that we're all involved in. And that's what makes great interviews. So massive thanks to Rob, and I hope you all enjoy. Welcome, Rob. How are you?
Dualta, how are you?
Third time lucky.
I love it. Love the technology.
Yeah, I'm using Anchor, and it is a little bit problematic. I'm probably going to upgrade things to include video and a few other things.
Like it.
But I'm suffering through Anchor for the meanwhile. And it distributes the podcast for us on all the channels. So it's really easy on that front, but it can be a bit choppy. And here,
well, listen, as you become more professional, I guess you need a professional tool.
That's right. I know that we're kind of getting into that place. It started with this, and then we went to New York and we got the videos and all done, and then we did a few round tables in London, and now the aim will be to get a camera crew and go over and do all these in Dublin.
Yeah,
and maybe get a bit of a party going with some agency owners over there.
I'll tell you what, that sounds good.
It does.
We like to party.
Yeah, I know Dublin well. So Rob, your path into recruitment, it hasn't been the standard finish university, this is your first job, somebody says go on, pick up the phone there, call through the numbers. I've heard that story 1,000 times. That's not your story, thank God. Walk me through how you entered into this industry.
Yeah, listen, I took a longer route than probably most. So yeah, listen, I'm as you can probably tell, I'm from Dublin, born and bred originally, and I left Dublin on finishing university and went to London specifically to get into sales. And I guess at the time, this is kind of early 2000s. Really wanted to get into technology. So found myself working for probably one of the most brilliant technology businesses going. It was a company called Touchbase, and they were a systems integrator, very specialized in the telco space. So probably selling mission critical voice solutions to banks and call centers and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So look, I guess I went to London to learn how to sell, and like that that love still exists to this day. So I guess plenty of people have gone down the recruitment route and have learned to sell. And I guess I went another route down the technology side of things.
I think, in my experience anyway, I think technology salespeople they will do a lot more, won't they, than your average recruiter?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like if you want to have an experiment on this, ask somebody for a recommendation on LinkedIn right now on an ATS system or a phone system, and you'll be cold called all day long.
Yeah. Look, I think in any industry, Dualta, you know yourself. I mean, look, in any industry, I think, there's guys who do it very well and they're trained very well. And I guess, look, there's plenty of people who don't do it so well. And I guess, look, I was really lucky to work for a guy who built an amazing culture. It was a very sales orientated or sales focused business, but look, there was two obsessions that he had, and one was clients, and the other was people. I.e. the people that worked in the business. And listen, it's that kind of centric approach that I picked up, I learned, and I've tried to bring with me, everywhere I've gone since, including into Ingenio to this day.
So you've had 3 core jobs before deciding to go down the recruitment route.
Yeah.
Well, were you running teams in those jobs? Like, what could you kind of give us a bit of a snapshot into what your career was like?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I learned to sell in an outbound inside sales. God, it was telesales back then, but I learned to sell in a very kind of like a pretty tough environment. I specialized then in terms of new business or acquisition as a discipline, and then I actually then went on. A guy I worked for many moons ago suggested I go and run relationships with key strategic clients. So I became an account director. And look, at that stage, then I'd kind of done all the roles in a sales team or function. And I picked up then responsibility for running a sales team. That was a European-wide sales team. And look, I guess the big break for me came when that company I was working with got acquired by a private equity-backed company called DataPoint. And I was asked by the CEO to go back to Dublin, where obviously I was from, and effectively pick up responsibility and ownership for their European business. So, yeah, look, I was 20. I was 20. I'd just gone 28 years of age, and I effectively became an MD for a business unit that was doing 20 million quid in revenue and had probably the guts of 200 people working in it. And listen, coupled with that, it was a private equity-backed business that had 2 banks as key majority stakeholders or shareholders. So, look, who were
you answerable to in that job?
I worked directly for the group CEO, so it was based in the UK, and I was one of 5 guys on his senior leadership team.
When you went into that job, what was that? What was that like? Like, what was the first? Like, was he giving you a mandate on? I need you to do all these things first, and then like take us from X point to Y, or like how did that? Like that's a big jump from like managing to manage 200 people. I can't even imagine where you start. Like, so walk me through that.
Yeah, like it was interesting actually. I almost nearly talked myself out of that job because I felt the jump was probably too big, and Vim, who was my CEO at the time, I mean, he said to me, he said, look, we're gonna work with you on a development plan and a kind of a program, coaching, mentoring, and that's going to take 6 months, and we're gonna drop you into it. And so look, I guess what I was really lucky there that they put a huge amount of structure and support around me, and a huge amount of kind of coaching and advisory and guidance that basically gave me a huge amount of comfort, as well as obviously all of the skills that I needed to go and kind of be in that position. So yeah, so look, I had a really really success. I mean, look, my metrics, my deliverables, everything changed from being very sales orientated, so probably gross profit or revenue orientated, and everything changed really overnight to being very EBITDA or net profit orientated or focused, because really that's what the shareholders in that business at that time, that's what they were interested in.
So what would your day look like?
Yeah, so I guess probably a better way to maybe describe it is, what did a typical working week look like?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I did a huge amount of travel. So obviously, we had HQ was in the UK. We had businesses in Spain, Germany, France, Italy, Netherlands, and obviously in Ireland. And look, I was really I had sales guys in each of those countries kind of rolled up to me. So we were delivering numbers, very very orientated. A couple of days a week on that. I was a couple of days orientated on being out in front of customers, and then look, I guess the last day of the week was very very internally focused, which was looking at the business, working with our finance functions across the region, and making sure that look, from a forecasting perspective, we were bang on plan. If we weren't, what were the gaps? What did we need to go and do to address? From an OPEX perspective, did we have control? Was anything running out of kilter? Look, the typical type of stuff that an MD would be doing. But listen, big change for me. So I went from being very, very customer orientated to being, quite insular, I guess. And but look, that's what we had to go and do.
And so you effectively a stats man at this stage.
Yeah, well, luckily enough, there was a finance team in that business of probably probably 10 or 12 people. So I had very specialist capability and resource that was significantly better than me in those areas, kind of doing a whole heap of analysis and reporting and insight. But yeah, listen, I mean, like, all of the metrics changed for me, almost overnight.
How did the recession affect you?
Yeah, again, I guess from a European perspective, we were relatively hedged, and I've always worked in businesses that are multinational orientated, as opposed to being focused on a very specific geography. And if you go back to 08, 09, 10, whilst things were pretty sick, I mean, things were very, very sick in Ireland at the time, and they were quite sick in the UK. Spain was on its knees. Italy was pretty sick, but the Northern European geographies, Germany, the Benelux region, and France, they didn't catch cold in the same way. And if you think about it, again, going back to the type of stuff that we were doing for clients, where we were selling voice, which, still to this day is it's really the only method of real-time communication. Those organizations, like, voice was absolutely critical to what they did. So we had very few clients kind of turn off service or go out of business because ultimately what they were trying to do was they were trying to stay alive. They were trying to do different things with their customers, communicate new ways, reduce costs. And we did very well off the back of that. So listen, I don't want to say for a second that it didn't kick us, but we had an isolated, we had a hedge to, I guess, some of the contamination that was going on in the market at the time.
Were you able to attract a lot of good talent in Dublin? I can imagine like being a salesperson in Dublin during that recession wouldn't have been hard. So if somebody could sell something that wasn't centered around the Dublin market, it must have been an attractive proposition.
Yeah, listen, I mean, like, we were able to pick up guys who, again, if I think about specifically the business in Ireland, like, we were able to pick up guys that, normally you'd never have had a chance of getting, because, clearly, look, lots of the big international businesses that had a focus on the Irish market, clearly they were reducing and downsizing and scaling back. But look, what I will say to you is, if you think about it, and I go back to 08, 09, I mean, one of our clients at the time was Google. And I mean, Google at that time were probably no more than 1,000 users, 1,000 employees here in Dublin. I mean, they're now, I think they're 6,500, 7,000. So like, the recession, whilst kind of things were going down in Ireland in one way, like from an employment perspective in the tech space, particularly, like things were kind of ramping up at the same hand. So listen, we were able to get some really good, interesting people, probably above and beyond our capabilities as a business at the time. But listen, it's a tough market to try and keep people here. It always has been.
And you get to a point where you guys obviously floated or sold. Did you ride off into the sunset and live in an island for a bit?
I started a recruitment business, Jill. So what do you think?
So here's the $1 million question. Why start a recruitment business?
Well, actually, what really interesting, actually. So Data Point, that business that I was working in. So those guys sold to a UK listed company called Maintel. So again, two great businesses, kind of came together. And just at that point, what I had done, I guess, and the stuff that we had learned, more importantly, I had this itch to say, and look, it comes from my dad's an entrepreneur, and it's definitely in the family. But I had this itch all the way along to go and do whatever it was for myself. But I wanted to do it myself, and so we got a bunch of guys together. So there was 5 of us in total, and so 3, I guess, on one side, 2 on another side, and we started. We got involved in a company called Capstone, and so again, very similar technology orientated business, London and Philadelphia, and look, I guess the genesis of that business was trying to really ramp things up from an international perspective, go after relatively the same market that we were going after when we were in Data Point, but try and do everything better and everything the right way, and go from there. And listen, we had 3.5 really successful years at Capstone. That story kind of came to an end really, really interestingly, because 3 of us on one side tried to buy the 2 guys out on the other side. So, we tried to effectively, engineer an MBO. And listen, I'm sure as your listeners will know, and you probably know yourself, I guess the first time you try and do an MBO, particularly, without maybe some corporate strategic advisors heavily on board, never goes well, right? So that's effectively what happened in that MBO scenario. So, we walked away. When I say we, again, I go back to James Smith and my co-founder here at Ingenio and I, and we walked away. Well, we effectively sold our stake in Capstone at the time, and look, that's where the genesis for Ingenio started.
Okay, so the 2 years walk away, and you think to yourself, we could do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
We could go sell it. But this recruitment stuff, anybody could do that, right? That's easy. That's way easier. We'll take all our network. We're way better salespeople than the recruiters will call us. And we'll have 100 people within 5 years, and we'll ride off into the sunset again. This time, it'll be all our own money, and everybody will live happily ever after.
You might have been listening into our brainstorming session, Dualta, huh?
Yeah. But let me tell you, it's never that simple in our game.
Listen, look, I think what I will say to you is, right, when we started Ingenio, and again, our intention always was to use that great experience that we had in the tech space, and be able to go back and obviously monetize that, right? So I think on day one, our kind of the light bulb for us in terms of proposition was, right, we want to sell to technology organizations, and we want to sell them, we want to sell, expertise, capability, differentiation. And look, yourself, most people start a recruitment business by saying, I've had a pretty shocking service or experience of X company or X industry in the past, and I think I can do, we think we can do a better job. And look, I think that was definitely, if you think about a very specific place like telco, that was one of the areas that kind of flew up for us. The other interesting area that we started on day one, alongside the recruitment business, was a consulting business, management consulting business, and that was going into probably like smaller startup scale up businesses and saying, we've got 15, 16, 17 years worth of really good experience in this space, and we think we can help you, build a sales team, or go into an international market where you've never been, or take a new product, or come up with a program or a campaign to try and accelerate maybe through channel. So all the things that are really attractive and interesting to technology companies. And we brought those two propositions, Jill, to technology businesses. And it was really interesting because actually our first two assignments when we started as Ingenio were two consulting assignments. And our next two assignments were recruitment programs to come off the back of those two consulting assignments. So I guess, look, our proposition worked, but interestingly enough, we thought that recruitment was going to be the kind of the initial couple of deals or transactions, and it ended up being the consulting way. The consulting stuff started first.
Yeah, and that's not. I mean, I've seen a lot of companies do that. There's a few companies.
Sure.
There's quite a few in Australia that do it from a systems integrator's perspective. So they'll, you'll know this more than me, but for anybody else that isn't accustomed to it, they'll it's called like staff augmentation, where they'll run all their IT for them, but then they'll start embedding staff throughout. And I suppose the big four do that in the finance world and all the rest, but then it's the big wins of the permanent placements on top of that is where the extra cream is made, I suppose.
That's it. But look, I mean, again, I think in let's keep to, I guess, what you and I are here to talk about, which obviously is recruitment. But what the consulting stuff has always helped us do really, really well is get an engagement with people who own the business, who have a shareholding, have a very, very clear handle in terms of vision, direction. And I think listening to Toby from Harrington Star, talk on your podcast a few weeks ago, I thought it was very interesting when he was saying about, the value of professional services firms. And like, if you can get people to really appreciate like what the impact of a standout individual or a couple of standout individuals to a technology business are, I mean, look, it's completely transformational. So like that pitch resonates really well with those guys that we're effectively delivering consulting services for.
No, absolutely. So you've worked in the consulting phase. If you were to come across you, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think for us, I think one of the things that we haven't done well, or haven't done as well as we probably thought we would do, like the impact of brilliant people in recruitment, I think it has far more impact in this space than certainly than the technology space that I've seen. And why is that, right? I mean, look, if you're selling technology to a client, or you're delivering technology to a client, like part of the heavy lifting is being done by an app, piece of software, piece of hardware, and the other part of the heavy lifting is being done by, a project or program management team or an implementation or a dev team or whatever the case may be, right? So you've got a hand in hand, like the technology alongside the people. I think in this space, you know, people are all important, and you know yourself. I mean, listen, you know, clearly every CEO of a recruitment company would love to automate everything, and we'd love, you know, you'd love robotics, process automation proliferated right across our business. But like, I mean, look, you simply can't happen. So having crucial people do the right roles all the way through our business, and paying huge overt attention to that, I think for us is probably the thing that we didn't do as well as we could have done over the first couple of years.
And knowing that, what does your plan look like to combat that moving forward?
Yeah, so we've had some brilliant advisors come in and help us, you know, over our 4 years
from the recruitment world.
Yeah, absolutely. Because look,
you got a shout out to anybody?
Yeah, listen, absolutely. So Dan Church, one of the founders of Hydrogen, my own wife, Sarah Owen, she's just started Walters People, the Irish business. And I think a really very specific piece of work from an advisory perspective is Adam Fletcher, who helped us ex Computer People. Adam was working with James Kahn and co, and Adam helped us on a very specific advisory and transformation piece of work last year. And yeah, look, I think what we've tried to do now with all of the people that work in Ingenio is, like, the intention is for every single person in this business to have an equity stake in our business. And the rationale for that is we're going to go on a journey, and that journey has a defined endpoint. And we want everyone who goes on that journey to benefit at the end of the journey. So it's a very collective.
Yeah, so like an EMI scheme.
Yeah, but it's a very collective, like, get on the bus, and you know, look, this is going to be a journey, right? There'll be ups, there'll be downs, but like, we want you on that bus with us all the way through to the very end. And I think, look, what that's done for us now, Jilt, is it's stitched people into the DNA and the fabric of Ingenio more so than maybe it has done in our first 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
we've worked with brilliant people, but like, they've been, you know, they've used us as not used us, but they've used Ingenio as a kind of a platform.
Yeah, to get a job in Google.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they're doing to everybody else in Dublin.
Yeah, exactly. So
let me jump back a step. What I want to get a couple of key points out of you. Dan Church.
Yeah.
What did he come in and give you specifically? Like, if you could think of one thing that he did.
Yeah, Dan was brilliant. I mean, if you think about it, Dan was one of 4 guys that started Hydrogen. I mean, look, they're a listed organization now, and you know, he's exited the business now. He exited probably 3 years ago. Dan was able to talk to us about what does the first 3 years look like. You know, I mean, he obviously, when he did his thing and we did our thing, I mean, we were mid to late 30s and Dan was in his early 20s. So, I mean, obviously we were all different lifestyles, life stages, you know, and that type of stuff. But Dan was really able to visualize what those first 3 years looked like.
And with that in mind, did he have a look at your structure and work backwards and try and get you to tweak anything?
Well, we were lucky with Dan in the sense that we brought Dan worked for us in the first 3 months. So actually, he was the engineer for a lot of the structure that we put in place.
Interesting.
So yeah, that was so he was stage one. Sarah, my wife. So Sarah's
you better be nice
recruiter.
Here now.
So, yeah, better be nice. Yeah, you're right. Sarah started her career at Badenoch and Clark.
Oh, she's old school, hey? She oh my God.
Yeah.
Did she tell you? Are you allowed a seat with your dinner, or does she take it away if you haven't made your calls?
Well, I'll tell you what she thought us, right? And Sorry, I managed to convince her, obviously, to move back from London with me, and she did a long stint with Morgan McKinley, and she's just started with Walter's people in Dublin this year to basically launch that new practice and proposition that they're building across
That'll
Europe.
be their RPO practice.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So
that's an exciting project.
It is, yeah. Listen, she's flipping cartwheels out of bed every morning. So yeah, look, she's very excited.
I tap her up to work with her. Only we headhunt people from Walters all the time. They breed great people, you know that.
That's it. Absolutely. No, listen, absolutely. But look, going back to her, so if you think about her career, I mean, what she's done with us and for us is really looking at the process. And it's about putting in place that kind of, it's a mechanical process that, it's a bit like a production line, right?
Absolutely.
Clearly there's impact, and clearly there's results, and there's disappointments. But like, if you're following a very strict formal process, then, I mean, look, you're not going to go too wild, in terms of too wildly wrong, either up or down.
Let me jump into that process. With this in mind, is she and she's having a look at this, is she coming in and saying, you guys have credibility, we need to build a machine that you can, go in there, win a piece of work, and then RPO it? Or is it, we're going to run a traditional contingency based model?
Yeah, I think we, I guess that, like, we've been able, and based on some of the clients that we work with, we've actually been able to do both.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
But I mean, look, so we have an RPO model, but like, it's a baby RPO, because
I've got the same. Yeah. We've just
exactly. So we've been lucky in the sense that, like, a lot of our clients, they're funded, and we don't typically go from a recruitment perspective down the startup route, but like, it's scale up and growth, probably up to 150, 200 million quid turnover. And those guys are coming to us saying, look, we've got a very particular project that we need to go and do in London or in Berlin or in Dublin or wherever. And it needs to look like this, but like, it's not 100 heads, it's 25. And it's a 3-month period. So look, that's we've been able to really gain from kind of, I guess, Sarah's expertise in putting those kind of programs together. And but look, we're probably going to be fighting it out on the battlefield now, given where she's at right now.
Well, they'll just scale up, won't they?
That's it. Yeah.
And I've heard they're diminishing a little bit on the contingency side, so I can understand why they've brought her in to do this. It's a good move for everybody involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And those type of, like, another reason why this is a good move is because every person I speak to in Dublin wants to be an internal recruiter. The amount of real salespeople there are thin on the ground.
Agreed. Yeah.
And that's why I don't do, like, I do work in Dublin. If somebody awesome approaches me and says, where's the best place for me to fast track my career? And then I go, okay, great, we're in, we'll do it. But the amount of recruiters that are just using it as a stopgap to get to Google, and working for Walters people for a year, that's the ultimate stopgap to get into Google, because it's not quite internal recruitment, but they'll have a sales team that'll work it, and then they'll have a delivery team which will be akin to working as an internal recruiter. So I can imagine they could scale that up massively over the next couple of years.
Yeah. Listen, I look, she, as I said, she started at the beginning of the year, and so she's done a roadshow around Europe to go and meet the guys and girls who effectively run those identical practices in the Netherlands and Belgium and France. And I mean, look, the growth that those guys have gone through in that brand in those countries, like, it's frightening.
They were discussing launching it when I used to work for them. I worked for them for 3 years. So it was
I saw that.
So there you go. Well, I mean, maybe she'll be a guest another time. She sounds like an interesting lady. So we've got away without saying anything bad about your wife. We can move on to what you learned off Adam Fletcher. And I'm always fascinated by what different advisors bring to the table. We didn't go down the advisor route. And we've only had access to these people through the podcast over the last year or two. And it's really changed the way that we think of the business and all the rest. So I'm glad to speak to somebody who's from day one gone, I don't know it all. Let's get the best people in and work out what'll work. So talk to me about Adam Fletcher.
Yeah, so I mean, look, Adam came in and did a 6-month piece of work for us. So again, look, I guess if you think about consultants, what we like to do is we like to eat our own dog food, right? It's a horrible phrase that we picked up in the tech space, but like, look, we like to buy into the stuff and do the stuff that we're trying to pitch to clients. So yeah, listen, we brought an expertise in. We bought, I should say, an expertise in, and Adam spent a really interesting kind of and quite a nervy 6 weeks in and around our business, both in London and also in Dublin, speaking to people, speaking to clients, doing a lot of analysis with our finance function and our accountants and all that type of stuff. And it was for that short period of time. And I always remember James and I having a beer in London saying, God, like, what on earth is going on here? He was really brutal in terms of the assessment of our business. And I guess if there was
how long ago was this?
This was just over 12 months ago.
Okay.
Just over
what type of feedback did he give you?
Well, look, I guess what he said was, from a like a client engagement perspective, to start positively, our clients loved us, and they loved the clarity around the proposition and the engagement, and the insight and the knowledge that we were able to bring, and also that we had kind of imparted on the guys that worked with us and for us. So stuff was good. Candidate stuff was reasonably good. We'd had some kind of up and down, kind of piece of feedback and whatnot on that side of things. But really interestingly, what he was very, very critical of was two things. Number one was our vision. So what did the next 3 years look like? We were pretty good in the year that we were in, but like he was very confused with what the next 3 years looked like specifically. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was, he was saying at the time, you look and feel very, very small. And in terms of the structures in the teams, like I can't see them scaling to, something significant. And if they do, it's going to be quite a bit of work to basically help that, to allow that scale. So look, I mean, we effectively ripped up the way our business was structured in terms of, client engagement, in terms of propositions, in terms of focus areas, in terms of geography, and also in terms of the types and sizes of clients that we've gone and worked with. So, and listen, it's that piece of work is tough, right? Because it's very, very critical. Obviously in a good way, right? But you've got to go into that like with a really, really open mind and a very open approach to basically saying, look, the guy here who's doing the piece of work, like, he's not having a go. He's trying to help us get to the next stage and the next stage and stuff like that. So yeah, listen, what we've ended up doing a whole heap of work off the back of it, and we lost a couple of people, which was a shame, because I guess there were people in the business who didn't like what was being said or didn't like the way things were going to be changed to get to that kind of future piece. But you know what? Look, we have to look at the bigger picture as opposed to taking a kind of a very micro approach to things. And I think, look, here we are 15 months later, having had, a brilliant year last year. And, Q1 for us was a record-breaking quarter. So, the building blocks are starting to bear fruit.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm I always find it like you sound a bit like myself in a in terms of being trying to be almost too clever,
Yeah, yeah,
and then that gets away of maybe there's probably a simpler way of doing it that it's done before. And I've done all this branding and marketing, and we've built this massive tent. But when I'm analyzing my own numbers recently and going through things, we're doing all right, but we don't really have the foundations in place to make it scale. So we're very much going through a similar process at the moment to do that. And luckily, my wife has just joined us.
yeah.
To break my balls a little bit and to tell me to try and stop being too clever and
Yeah.
get on with the thing. So it leads me to my question. Now that you feel confident, what when you were writing, when you ripped up the script and you're writing down what is going to be happening over the next 3 to 6 years, how can you go from, you're at a head count of 6 billers right now, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
So you're at a head count of 6 billers without knowing nothing about your business. Not all of them are going to be profitable. Some of them might be really profitable, and you guys might be billing lots of money yourself. How are you going to go from this point to working your way out of being hands-on billing over the next period of time? Was that part of the stuff that they rolled into a plan or got you to roll into a plan?
Yeah, very much so. I guess, look, and you know this better than most, right? I mean, look, the I guess there's a couple of ways, right, that we can go and grow. We've had a look at all these options, right? I mean, we think our proposition right now, interestingly enough, I know a whole heap of the guys that have contributed to your podcast, like they go to the States, or they've gone to Asia. And listen, like I'd love a New York office, but I mean, I don't see that in the next 3 years, because like I think what we can do is we can become really, really specialist and very, very precise in Europe, and hopefully own that kind of space and be the guys that are really, really famous for working with tech companies across the European region. And that's my vision for Ingenio.
And scale is the one thing that's really because you've got the vision now.
Yeah.
You've probably got the processes it sounds like you've probably got loads of processes,
yeah.
Given all those advisors that you've had in, and you've got the credibility and the network. It sounds like you kind of need to go on a hiring bonanza and be able to attract a wave of people that can contribute. Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah. Listen, I think so that's partially true, but here's hopefully the bit that makes us a little more unique maybe than others, right? So if you think about,
I think you're plenty unique.
Well, look, I mean, listen, hopefully we're partially, but what I would say is this: taking our tech background and look, we probably more than most in this gig, we really understand the impact of technology. And I know you're a huge fan of automation and kind of outsourcing almost to be really, really focused on, the core key things.
Yeah.
My vision, Dualta, for this business is to create a professional services firm whereby it's an upside down triangle, whereby most of the people in our business are fee earning and billers.
Yeah.
And what I want is I want to have every single fee earner in my business. I want them to have a robot working for them in a PA advisory assistance function at some point in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Yeah. So we're just about to kick off. A proof of concept with the largest RPA, robotic process automation firm in the world, to go and deploy robotic licenses to go and do a couple of different, I won't go into too much detail if you don't mind, because obviously, look, it's a little sensitive, right? But to do 2 key functions in our finance function and in our research function. And listen, I'd love to have a chat with you in hopefully 3 months' time, and maybe give you a little bit of an insight into what it looks like, and is it as good as maybe some of the kind of business case that we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Just to simplify that, like what type of stuff are you trying to automate, and like to what ends? Is it administration? Is it the finding of data, or the engagement of said people, or like is?
Well, let me talk about it. Let me talk about I guess on the finance side of things. So
Okay.
look, we have a contract business right now that it's relatively small in comparison to, I guess, some of your other listeners. But look, that contract business creates, as you know, like a mountain of paperwork or administration on a weekly basis. Okay, so think about the whole kind of initiative in terms of timesheet in, timesheet approval, invoice in, invoice paid, accounts payable, VAT recollection, VAT reclaim, and account, all that type of stuff. Now, those
you don't use a factoring company?
Yeah, well, look, we have that capability, but clearly what we've got to go and do before a lot of that stuff happens is there's still a large piece of administration that happens here. Okay.
Yeah.
To be able to roll up into, we work with a company called BOT, Back Office Support Services, up outside Stoke, but there's still a huge heap of work that needs to be done there, and all of that information is binary, right?
Yeah.
So the answer to it, or the action, I should say, to it, is either a 1 or a 0. So if it's a 1, you do this. If it's a 0, you do this. And we think that we can probably automate 80%, 85% of the stuff that comes in and out of our business on a weekly basis. Now, look,
I bet you can.
That's not necessary. That's not a headcount reduction exercise for us. So
no, it's a focusing exercise, so people can focus on the big ticket stuff that brings in fees.
Big time. But look, here's the magic for us. As we grow and scale, it is 100% a recruitment prevention initiative. So we don't need to hire when the book grows from X to Y. We don't need to hire accordingly. And look, yourself, look, that's when impact on net profit really starts to kind of really impact. So look, that's some of the stuff that we've done ourselves, but that's the kind of focus that Adam has helped us kind of get to in terms of clarity and how will we be different, and where are we going to focus on, and how we're going to kind of bring our team and bring all the brilliant people who work with us along on that bus journey, as I mentioned. And people buy into that because it is hopefully a little different.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. And so if we touch base again in a year's time, get you on, what's the world going to look like for you?
Well, hopefully you'll be speaking to Rob Magee's robot, not Rob Magee. Wouldn't that be amazing?
that would be pretty good, eh? Hopefully that'll be me it'll be my robot chasing an invoice because I've placed somebody with.
Well, look, there you go. That's utopia. Robots talking to robots, I love it. But,
all right, Rob, we're going to leave it there. Thanks so much for the chat. I really enjoyed it. You come to this with a whole different perspective, and I like that you're obsessed with learning and trying new things. And it sounds like we'll have lots to chat about the next time that we catch up and do this again.
Dualta, thanks a million. Love what you're doing, and continued success. Really appreciate your time.
Take care.
All the best.
Hope you all enjoyed that interview with Rob Magee, and he asked me to give a bit of a shout out that his company are hiring and are quite open to people being based remotely, because they've got mature sales processes in place. And so if you're looking for a remote recruitment role, then hit me up and I will introduce you to Rob. All right. Thanks very much. And I've got a ton of podcasts to get out, so stay tuned. I've got a few more from our trip in New York. And the videos on that are all on our YouTube channel. So jump onto the YouTube channel if you prefer the visuals rather than the audio. And we've got a few more local ones that we've been doing, but I just haven't had the chance to go and get it all done. But I'm catching up now. So thanks very much for tuning in again, and please like, rate, and subscribe.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.